The call for help. The galaxy had always been a place of chaos. Wars were fought over resources and entire star systems fell into darkness when civilizations collapsed. But in this chaos, a signal was sent. A simple message, a cry for help, echoed. Through the stars, the planet of Jorin 5 was in distress. Its cities were burning, its people running for their lives. The alien species, the Jelani, had never known peace. Constantly attacked by rival factions, they had sent out their final distress signal, hoping for any kind of aid, any sort of intervention that could save them from annihilation. The Jelani were not a weak species, but their enemies were relentless. Their military had been overwhelmed, their defenses shattered. The last hope rested on the shoulders of those they had contacted, the Deathworlders of Earth. Back on Earth, the military leadership gathered in a secure command center. They had received the SOS, but their reaction was not one of hesitation. The Deathworlders, humans who had evolved on a harsh, brutal planet, were not known for their mercy or patience. They had a reputation for handling problems in their own way, and this SOS was no different. General Marshall was in charge of the operation. He was a tall, imposing figure, hardened by years of combat. His eyes scanned the reports flashing across his screen, the urgency in the message undeniable. The Jelani were asking for help, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. "We're going to send a message back," General Marshall said, his voice cold and firm. "Tell them that help is on the way. But they won't get what they expect." The plan was simple. Earth would respond to the SOS, but not in the way the Jelani thought. A fleet of human Deathworlders, equipped with the most advanced and lethal warships, would make their way to Jorin 5. And the Jelani, for all their desperation, were about to learn that humans were not saviors, they were conquerors. The human fleet arrives. The Jelani waited with bated breath, watching the skies for any sign of hope. They had never seen anything like this before, large, distant shapes drifting in the blackness of space. For days, they scanned their instruments, unsure of whether the fleet had arrived or if they were witnessing a dream. The ships that entered Jorin 5's orbit were not like anything the Jelani had ever encountered. They were massive, sleek, and intimidating. Their hulls were made of materials that glowed with an eerie, almost unearthly light, reflecting the power and destruction they carried within. General Marshall's fleet was led by the Cerberus, a warship so large it could easily house the entire Jelani military and still have room to spare. The crew aboard the Cerberus was a mix of Earth's most battle-hardened soldiers, human Deathworlders who had been through hell and back. They were veterans of countless campaigns, each one more brutal than the last. "Prepare for landing," Marshall ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of what was to come. His soldiers didn't flinch. They had seen war on a scale the Jelani could not comprehend. On the surface, the Jelani leaders awaited the arrival of their supposed saviors. They had imagined humans to be another weak species, relying on diplomacy and kindness to solve their problems. But as they watched the human ships descend, they realized their mistake. The humans didn't arrive with words of peace, they came with weapons. The fleet began to descend onto the planet's surface, large dropships cutting through the atmosphere. As they landed, their engines roared like the sound of 1,000 storms. The ground shook beneath them, as if the very planet itself was trembling in fear. General Marshall stood at the head of the landing party. His expression was unreadable, his uniform immaculate, but his presence alone was enough to send a message. The Deathworlders had arrived. And they were here to take control. "All units, deploy," Marshall commanded. The soldiers disembarked with military precision, their weapons drawn and ready. The Jelani looked on, unsure whether to feel relieved or terrified. They had asked for help, but the humans were not offering it in the way they had expected. The first encounter. The moment the Deathworlders set foot on Jorin 5's surface, the atmosphere seemed to change. The Jelani, still confused and nervous, watched as these humans moved through their cities, their towering warships casting ominous shadows over the burning skyline. The Jelani had hoped for reinforcements to defend them, but what they got were warriors of another kind. General Marshall led the charge into the city, his soldiers flanking him. They walked with the confidence of those who had fought in the worst conditions imaginable, survived, and thrived. Their battle armor gleamed in the light of the twin suns, reflecting the harsh reality of their mission. The humans weren't here to fight alongside the Jelani. They had arrived to take command, and the message was clear. A Jelani diplomat, Korik, approached cautiously. He was tall for his species, his limbs long and thin, but his posture betrayed a mix of awe and fear. He had been tasked with meeting the humans, hoping to offer peace before anything escalated further. We thank you for your swift arrival," Korik began, his voice shaky. "Our planet is in ruin. Please, help us reclaim our cities. Together, we can fight our enemies." Marshall turned his gaze toward Korik, his expression cold. His soldiers had spread out across the city, securing key positions. The Jelani did not realize just how outmatched they were. "Help?" Marshall's voice was low, almost mocking. "We didn't come to help, Korik. We came to end this." The diplomat's eyes widened in confusion, and before he could respond, Marshall continued. "You see, on Earth, we learned a long time ago that the only way to survive in a universe like this is to take control. You may have been fighting for survival, but we've been fighting for supremacy. And now, it's your turn to learn that lesson." Korik faltered, unsure of how to respond. The human's words didn't make sense to him. He had expected soldiers ready to join their fight, not conquerors who spoke of domination. "We will end this war," Marshall said, his tone final. "But we'll do it on our terms. Your enemies will know what it's like to face a real army." The Deathworlders moved quickly. No one was prepared for the ruthless efficiency with which they neutralized the Jelani's enemies. Where the Jelani had faltered in their defense, the humans swept in with surgical precision. Entire enemy fleets were destroyed before they even had the chance to retreat. The Jelani were left stunned, watching their planet's fate shift in real time. "Get used to it," Marshall said as he watched a fleet of enemy ships turn to debris. "This is how it's done." The planet's atmosphere, which had been filled with fear and confusion, now crackled with something else, a sense of awe. The Jelani had never seen a species fight like this. Their enemies had never fallen so easily. It was a display of raw, unfettered power that sent a clear message. When the Deathworlders answered an SOS, they did so with overwhelming force. A shattered illusion. The Jelani had spent centuries battling for survival, always on the defensive. They had developed intricate tactics and advanced technologies, but nothing had prepared them for the onslaught of human Deathworlders. Within hours of Marshall's arrival, their enemies had been wiped out. The Jelani cities, once burning and under siege, were now eerily quiet, save for the sounds of human soldiers securing every corner of the planet. Korik watched as General Marshall and his soldiers moved through the capital, overseeing the installation of human-controlled defense systems and communication hubs. The city, which had once represented the heart of the Jelani's hope for a new beginning, now looked like a conquered city, completely under human control. "What have you done?" Korik's voice trembled with disbelief. "We asked for help, and you've taken over." Marshall glanced at him with a hint of amusement. "We did help, Korik. We did what was necessary. Your planet needed saving, and saving it meant ensuring it would never be under the threat of destruction again. Now, your enemies will think twice before they come for you." "But we didn't want to be ruled," Korik said, his voice fading into a whisper. "We wanted allies, not conquerors." Marshall's eyes hardened, and he placed a hand on Korik's shoulder. "Sometimes, survival isn't about alliances. It's about strength. And that's what we are offering, protection, but on our terms." The rest of the Jelani leaders had gathered in the city center, watching from a distance as their home transformed into a heavily fortified stronghold. Their once proud civilization was now subject to the will of a species they barely understood. They had believed the Deathworlders would come and fight for them. Instead, they were watching their planet become a base for the humans to expand their influence. Korik was torn. He had seen the devastation caused by their enemies, and he had witnessed firsthand how quickly the humans had ended the conflict. There was no denying the effectiveness of their intervention. But at what cost? The Jelani no longer had a say in their fate. Earth had not simply answered their SOS, they had taken control. As the days passed, the humans' presence became more embedded in the Jelani's world. Earth's technology was integrated into the planet's infrastructure, and a new order began to take shape. The Jelani soldiers, once proud defenders of their world, now found themselves training under human instructors. They had no choice but to adapt to the brutal methods of their new masters, and all the while, General Marshall watched from his command center, knowing that the message had been delivered. The Jelani had been shown that strength was the only thing that mattered. There would be no more fighting, no more surrendering. The Deathworlders had made sure of that. The price of power. As the weeks passed, the Jelani struggled to adjust to their new reality. The human presence on their world was undeniable, and the transformation was swift and unrelenting. Earth's warships were anchored above the planet, their imposing silhouettes casting a shadow over every city, every village, every inch of the surface. The human Deathworlders had a grip on Jorin 5 that was as unshakable as it was suffocating. Korik spent sleepless nights walking through the cities, the memories of what his people had once known haunting him. The Jelani were a proud species, but pride meant little in the face of such overwhelming power. The humans had dismantled their defensive systems, replaced them with Earth's superior technology, and established a new military outpost. The planet was now an extension of Earth's might, a powerful weapon in the hands of a species that had never known defeat. But even as the Jelani adapted to their new rulers, an undercurrent of resentment simmered beneath the surface. Some of the Jelani leaders had accepted the reality of their situation, acknowledging that they were alive only because of the humans' intervention. Others, however, found it hard to accept the loss of their autonomy. One such leader, Elira, had once been a general in the Jelani military. She had fought in countless battles, and her reputation for fierce leadership was known across the galaxy. But now, under the shadow of the human Deathworlders, she felt her spirit break. The humans didn't offer alliances, they simply took what they wanted. Earth's offer of protection came with a price, the complete subjugation of her people. Elira's anger simmered, but she knew that resistance was futile. The humans had made it clear that they would tolerate no defiance. Even a whisper of rebellion was swiftly crushed, and the Deathworlders' swift and brutal tactics were a chilling reminder of what happened when their authority was challenged. "I can't stand this," Elira muttered to Korik one evening, as they watched the human soldiers train their newly formed Jelani battalions. "We've become nothing more than pawns in their game." Korik was silent for a moment, watching as the human instructors barked orders, their eyes unyielding. They did not care about the Jelani's pain, nor their history. The Deathworlders only cared about one thing: control. "Do you think they'll ever leave?" Korik asked softly, his voice tinged with a sense of hopelessness. Elira shook her head. "No. They won't leave. Not until they've taken everything we have left." Meanwhile, General Marshall sat in his command center, reviewing reports from his fleet. The operation had gone even better than expected. The Jelani were adapting to the humans' presence with remarkable efficiency, though it came at a cost. The Deathworlders had shown no mercy, and their methods were leaving scars on the planet's psyche, but Marshall wasn't concerned with the Jelani's feelings. He had one goal in mind: to ensure that Earth's power would never again be questioned. Jorin 5 was only the beginning. The galaxy had learned that when the humans answered an SOS, they didn't come to save, it was the galaxy that needed to survive them. "We'll keep them under our thumb," Marshall said to his officers. "The Jelani are useful for now, but they will be just one of many. We can't let anyone forget what happens when they ask Earth for help." The Deathworlders had claimed Jorin 5. Not as allies, but as an example of Earth's dominance. And the message had been sent loud and clear: when Earth responds to a call for help, they bring far more than anyone could ever expect. The ripple effect: as the human Deathworlders solidified their hold on Jorin 5, their presence began to reverberate throughout the galaxy. The Jelani had once been a proud and independent species, but now they were a footnote in Earth's vast web of influence. The other alien factions that had been watching, waiting for an opportunity to challenge Earth's growing power, began to shift uneasily. The humans' display of brutal efficiency had sent a message that could not be ignored. Throughout the galaxy, rumors began to spread. Planets once indifferent to Earth's growing might now began to consider the consequences of defying them. Some sought to form alliances with the humans, hoping to avoid their wrath. Others, like the ruthless Zaylor, prepared to strike first before they too would find themselves at Earth's mercy. Meanwhile, on Jorin 5, the Jelani struggled to find their place in a world that no longer recognized them as rulers of their own destiny. As Earth soldiers continued to train the Jelani military, Korik found himself grappling with his guilt. His people were safe, yes, but they were no longer free. The price of survival had been too high, and he could see the hollow looks in the eyes of his fellow Jelani. They had once been strong, but now they were nothing more than subjects to the human overlords. One day, as Korik walked through the streets of a city now fully under Earth's control, he encountered Elira. She stood at the edge of a courtyard, watching the humans run drills with the Jelani soldiers. The sight of it, the humans giving orders, the Jelani soldiers obeying without question, was too much for Elira to bear. "I can't do this anymore," Elira said quietly, her voice filled with a quiet, simmering rage. "This isn't who we are. We were a proud people, and now look at us." Korik sighed. "We didn't have a choice, Elira. The humans came and they saved us, yes, but they also took everything we had. And they won't leave. Not until they've taken everything they want." "I'm not talking about them," Elira snapped. "I'm talking about us. We've become cowards. They've stripped us of our pride and we've let them. We've let them take everything from us. But I won't let them take my spirit." Korik watched her, uncertain. There was fire in Elira's eyes, the same fire that had once made her a legend among the Jelani. But now, that fire was burning against the humans who had saved them. Korik knew that rebellion was impossible. The humans had crushed their enemies with terrifying efficiency, and there was no way the Jelani could rise against them. Not with their resources stretched thin, not with their military in shambles. "You can't fight them, Elira," Korik said softly. "The humans are too powerful. If you try, they'll wipe us all out." Elira turned away from him, her face hard. "Maybe that's what we deserve. Maybe we should fight. Maybe it's time we stop being pawns." But as she walked away, Korik could only shake his head. The Jelani had lost more than just their freedom, they had lost their will to fight. And even though Elira's words burned in his heart, he knew that resistance was not an option. The Deathworlders had arrived to reshape the galaxy, and no one, not even the Jelani, could stand in their way. The final choice days turned into weeks, and the tension on Joran 5 became unbearable. The Jelani had reluctantly accepted their new reality, but beneath the surface, anger festered. The human presence had become an ever-present reminder that their world was no longer their own. Every corner of the planet now bore the mark of Earth's influence, human-made structures, military installations, and communication hubs that had been installed without consultation, without consent. The Jelani leaders had been given a choice. Accept the humans as overlords, or face the consequences. The message had been delivered in full force, and there was no question who held the power. Earth was not a species to be bargained with, and it made that abundantly clear, but Elira's words still haunted Korik. He had seen the fire in her eyes, the defiance that refused to be extinguished, and for the first time, Korik began to question everything. Was there another way? Was it possible to regain what they had lost? Could they ever be free again? Late one night, Korik met with Elira in secret, in a quiet corner of the city where the humans rarely patrolled. The stars above seemed distant, as though they were mocking the Jelani's plight. Elira's face was grim, but there was a spark of resolve in her eyes. "We can't live like this anymore," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I won't watch our people become slaves to these Earthlings. They came here to save us, but they've taken everything we had. They think they can just control us without consequence." Korik looked at her, torn between loyalty to his people and the harsh reality of their situation. "We can't fight them, Elira. Not after everything they've done. We don't have the strength." "Then we find it," Elira replied. "We'll unite the Jelani. We'll show the humans that we are not just puppets on their strings." "But how?" Korik asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "They control everything, our technology, our defenses, our very lives. We are not ready to stand against them. It would be suicide." Elira's gaze hardened. "What's worse, Korik? Fighting to reclaim our freedom, or living as slaves to them forever?" Korik knew the answer. But the weight of the decision pressed heavily on him. He understood what it meant to fight, to truly fight for survival. The Deathworlders didn't understand compromise or negotiation. They only understood power. And Elira was right, living under their heel would be a fate worse than death. "I'll stand with you," Korik said, his voice steady despite the storm. brewing inside him. But we'll need more than just words. We need allies. We'll find them, Elira said, determination in her voice. The galaxy won't sit back and let the humans rule it all. There are others who will fight beside us. As the two of them left the secluded area, a quiet resolve settled over them. They had made their choice. The Jelani would not live in the shadow of Earth's empire forever. No matter the cost, they would rise again, but what neither Korik nor Elira knew was that Earth had already anticipated their next move. The Deathworlders had been watching, waiting for the first signs of rebellion. General Marshall knew the Jelani too well. They were a proud species, and pride could only be suppressed for so long. Within days, Earth's forces would tighten their grip on Joran 5, and the Jelani's efforts would be crushed before they had a chance to spark. The humans weren't here to negotiate. They were here to reshape the galaxy in their image, and as the humans prepared to make their move, Korik and Elira stood on the brink of war, unaware that they had already lost.